Did you open the file again last night? The one that actually matters? Read what was already there, rest your hands on the keyboard, and then close it without adding a single word? And on your way to bed, did you promise yourself what you promised last Tuesday, that you'll get to it properly this weekend when your head is clearer? Laziness doesn't behave like that. A lazy person never opens the file. What you're up against is something far more sophisticated, a security system your own intelligence designed years ago to keep you safe, and it still runs every night, silently, at the cost of the exact life you keep saying you want. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to walk you through that system one component at a time. Why your most persuasive reasons deserve the least trust. Why an experiment from 1978 explains your worst habits better than any productivity book ever has. And why the way out has almost nothing to do with discipline. By the end, you'll be holding one small, almost embarrassingly modest move that slips past the guard without tripping a single alarm. But you can't use it yet. First, you have to see the guard clearly, because right now it doesn't look like a guard at all. It looks like good judgment. Start with a picture. Two people, in the same January, decide to write a book. The first one is ordinary, a decent mind, nothing remarkable.
When the doubts arrive, and they arrive for everyone, he can't build much of a case out of them. His objections come out clumsy. I'm tired, this is hard, maybe it's bad. Clumsy objections are easy to step over, so he writes badly, most mornings, at a kitchen table next to a cooling mug of coffee. And by December, he has a rough draft. It's flawed. It exists. The second person is brilliant, and her brilliance goes to work immediately on the case her waiting. The market is crowded this year. The idea needs one more month of research. The outline has a structural weakness in the second act that should really be resolved before serious drafting begins. Notice something about every one of those arguments. Each is true. Each would survive scrutiny in front of a committee. That is precisely what makes them lethal. A weak excuse collapses the moment you lean on it. A brilliant one holds your entire weight all year. By December, she has no draft. She has a beautifully reasoned file of reasons, and every single one of them checks out. If you asked her in that moment, she wouldn't say she was afraid. She would say she was being rigorous. That's the first thing to understand about an intelligent person's sabotage. It never introduces itself as fear. It arrives wearing the clothes of the virtues you're proudest of: rigor, prudence, high standards, and it borrows your own vocabulary to argue its case. Her intelligence didn't fail her. It performed flawlessly. It simply took the job of building the cage instead of the door. Most of us were raised on the idea that a sharp mind is protection, that the smarter you are, the fewer traps can hold you. Watch closely and you'll see the reverse. The traps that hold intelligent people are made of intelligence, which means the first tool I can hand you is a strange one. Stop taking your own reasons at face value. When your mind produces an unusually persuasive case against doing the thing you care about most, the persuasiveness itself is the tell. Ordinary decisions never need a legal defense, so before you accept the argument, put a different question to it. Don't ask whether it's true. Ask who commissioned it. You'll recognize the commissioned work by its polish, because honest doubts usually arrive rough and half-formed, while the protective ones show up fully drafted, footnoted, and strangely eager to be believed. And that question opens onto a bigger one, the one this whole half hour turns on. Why would a mind that capable aim itself at the cage? Nobody runs a con on themselves for nothing.
Somewhere in the transaction, the stalling must be buying something, some payment valuable enough to justify a lost year or a lost decade. It is, and in 1978, two psychologists caught the purchase happening in the open and gave it a name. Stephen Berglas and Edward Jones called it self-handicapping, and once you see the mechanism, you will find it very hard to unsee. Here is its shape. A student carries a reputation, the smart one, the one with potential, and privately she suspects the reputation is inflated. Tomorrow's exam could settle the question for good. So what does she do the night before? She goes out. She stays out until 3 in the morning, and she makes sure people saw her there. Now the exam can't touch her. If she aces it anyway, imagine that. Brilliant, even on 4 hours of sleep. If she bombs it, well, obviously, no sleep. Either result leaves the reputation standing. The one outcome she has made impossible is the only one that carried real information. Resting fully, preparing completely, giving the thing everything she has, and finding out where her ceiling actually sits. The hangover was never carelessness. It was an insurance policy, and the premium was her real performance. You probably haven't pulled the 3 in the morning version since you were 20, but the adult forms are everywhere once you know the silhouette.
Saying yes to so many commitments that no single one can ever be a fair test of you. Opening the proposal at 11 the night before it's due, so the result says more about the clock than about you. Mentioning casually to anyone within earshot that you barely had time to prepare. Keeping the side project half secret, so that if it dies unwitnessed. Every one of these buys the same product, an explanation that isn't you. And the cost of the purchase is steep beyond accounting, because you can never discover what you're capable of. Discovery is the exact event the whole arrangement exists to prevent. If you want a portrait, take a woman we'll call Elena, a team lead with a product pitch due in March. The pitch, the one that could move her whole career. In January, she volunteers for 2 hiring committees. In February, she absorbs a struggling junior's workload because someone had to. By the week of the pitch, her calendar is a wall of other people's needs, and she assembles the deck in fragments on the train after 10 at night. The pitch lands as fine, and walking out of the room, she feels something she would never confess to anyone: relief. A fine pitch built on stolen hours proves nothing about her ceiling. A great pitch attempted with her full strength, in front of everyone, some quiet accountant inside her decided months ago that the risk on that was unacceptable. Nobody in her life would call any of it sabotage. Her calendar did the entire job. The countermove is almost uncomfortably simple, and it works because the strategy only functions in the dark. The moment you notice yourself arranging an obstacle, the late start, the deliberately overloaded week, the conveniently timed crisis, say what's happening out loud, in plain words. I am building an excuse before I've begun. You're saying it to expose the trick, because self-handicapping is a piece of stage magic, and a magic trick narrated step by step stops working on its audience. Still, the crowded bar and the 11th hour start are the crude versions, visible from across the room when somebody points. There is a far quieter version running in you right now, and nobody will ever call it sabotage, because from the outside it looks like your finest quality. It's probably cost you more hours than every late night combined. It's the thinking. The psychologist Susan Nolan Hoeksema spent her career studying what happens when a mind turns a problem over and over without acting on it. She called the loop rumination, and her findings were blunt. It doesn't produce solutions. It deepens paralysis and darkens mood, while generating a convincing sensation of work being done. That last clause is the trap's teeth. Rumination feels like diligence. It files itself under preparation. And for an analytical mind, it is uniquely seductive, because when a smart person feels threatened, they retreat to home turf, and their home turf is thought. Picture someone standing at the edge of a cold pool, meaning to swim. The genuinely stuck version of this person doesn't refuse the water. Refusal would at least be honest. Instead, they research swimming. They read about stroke technique. They weigh the water temperature, and whether today is really the optimal day, and whether the entry should be the steps or a clean dive. An hour passes. They are mentally exhausted, thoroughly informed, and completely dry. The mind has learned to scratch the itch of the plunge without the shock of the cold. Thinking about the leap delivers a small, safe simulation of leaping, and the simulation is dangerous precisely because it partially satisfies. Every lap of the loop burns off just enough urgency to keep you on the tiles another day. Most of us with quick minds were trained into this in rooms with fluorescent lights and rows of desks. Every reward school ever handed you came from thinking, the right answer, the clean analysis, the essay that saw all sides. Nobody ever graded you on plunging, so the mind concluded, across 20 years of report cards, that thought is where its worth gets minted, and it returns there under pressure the way any of us return to the thing we were praised for. This is why telling an overthinker to just stop overthinking accomplishes nothing. You're asking them to walk away from the only currency they've ever been paid in. And the loop carries a stake you may never have priced. While you circle, the water isn't waiting for you. The pool closes. Seasons of your one life keep ending, quietly, on schedule, whether or not you ever got wet. So the line you need is a hard one, drawn in advance, between researching and deciding. Give the decision itself a deadline measured in minutes. When the time ends, act on whatever you have. 30 minutes for a choice you've circled for a month sounds irresponsible until you look at what the month actually produced. If more thinking were going to settle it, it would have settled it by now. Somewhere around day 4, the analysis stopped being analysis and became shelter. I want to show you what that looks like in a real kitchen because it sounds reckless until you watch it work. A man in his mid-30s, call him Daniel, had spent 4 months choosing a platform for the newsletter he had been about to start for 2 years. 4 months of comparison articles, feature grids, pricing tiers, browser tabs he was afraid to close. One Sunday evening, he set the timer on his stove for 30 minutes, sat down with the 2 finalists, and made himself choose before it rang. He chose. And he chose partly wrong. Within 3 weeks, he discovered that the plan he'd picked charged for a feature its rival gave away, and that migrating later would be a headache. But run the ledger honestly. 3 weeks in, Daniel had published 4 issues, gathered 110 readers, and learned from their replies what they actually wanted to read, which turned out to be different from what 4 months of research had assumed. The version of Daniel still comparing feature grids had none of that and never would. His mistake cost him a little money and an afternoon. The researching had been costing him the entire project. And there was a quieter dividend he only noticed later. Having chosen once, under a timer, the next decision, what to write first, took him 10 minutes, and the one after that took 5. Deciding, it turns out, behaves like the cold water itself. Tolerance builds with exposure, and the third entry is easier than the first. That is the trade, stated plainly.
The discomfort of choosing on incomplete information is the entry fee for ever moving at all, and the fee doesn't shrink while you stand at the window. It compounds. Now, everything I've told you so far rests on one assumption, and it's time to break it. I've been describing a system that protects you from failure. That's the obvious reading, and it's wrong in a way that changes what you do about it. Because if the fear were really about failing, it would fade as the successes stacked up. Look at your own record for a moment. Has it faded? The degree didn't quiet it. The title didn't. The clients, the raises, the compliments accepted with a wave of the hand, none of it ever reached the fear, and there's a reason none of it ever will. The same year Burgess and Jones named self-handicapping, 2 other psychologists, Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, published a paper about something strange they kept meeting in their practice. Their most accomplished clients, the ones with the degrees and the titles and the track records, were the ones most privately convinced they were frauds. Clance and Imes called it the imposter phenomenon, and there is a cruel geometry underneath it. When you first learn a field, you can't see the edges of your own ignorance, so confidence comes cheap. As you grow expert, your map of everything that exists expands faster than your mastery of it. The horizon of everything I should know keeps receding, no matter how fast you walk toward it. So the promotion doesn't feel earned. It feels like a clerical error awaiting discovery. The praise doesn't land as evidence. It lands as pressure, because now there's more to live up to and further to fall. Watch it happen on an ordinary Friday. A senior engineer, 15 years in, the one everyone routes the hard problems to, gets the promotion email at 10 minutes to 5. She reads it twice, looking for the error. Not a typo, the mistake. Some sign that this was meant for someone else, that whoever decided didn't really look. Her colleagues would laugh at the idea that she, of all people, carries this feeling. She wrote half the systems they rely on. That's the phenomenon in a single frame. The more her competence has grown, the wider her view of everything she hasn't mastered. So the promotion reads as altitude instead of achievement. She sends back a thank you she rewrites 4 times, then drives home rehearsing how she'll cope on the day they figure it out.
Hold that geometry next to everything we've built so far, and the whole picture turns. The security system has a different tripwire than we assumed. It wakes for measurement, for the prospect of being fully seen, fully tested, fully judged. That's why success makes it more anxious rather than less. Every win raises the platform you'd be falling from, and that's why sabotage begins to look, from the inside, like a strange kind of mercy. If you undercut yourself before they can expose you, at least the fall happens on your own terms. Better to be the one who never quite tried than the fraud dragged into the light. Read that sentence back slowly, because some version of it has been running your decisions for years. There's a reframe here, and it's sturdier than reassurance. The feeling of fraudulence is a location reading. It tells you where you're standing, out near the edge of your competence, in the thin air where the map runs out. And the edge of your competence is the only place growth has ever happened. The people who feel like imposters are almost never the actual imposters. The genuine frauds tend to sleep soundly. If some part of you whispers that you don't belong in the room, take it as coordinates. You've walked further than your self-image has. And once you see that the system guards against exposure rather than failure, one of the most respectable words in your vocabulary starts to look suspicious. Perfectionism has the best publicity of any flaw in the language. Say it in a job interview and everyone smiles, but watch it operate up close. Picture a designer with a folder on her desktop. 30 projects, every one of them 90% finished, not one of them shipped. From the outside, high standards. From the inside, the logic is entirely different. As long as the work stays unfinished, it can't be judged. In her head, each project is still infinite, still potentially brilliant, still capable of being anything. The moment she exports the file and sends it, it collapses out of possibility into one specific, flawed, judgeable object that people can look at and shrug. So she polishes the same corner again. She has done that corner 11 times. The corner was finished 9 visits ago. The polishing postpones the verdict, and postponing the verdict is the entire job. Most of us are carrying some version of that folder. It might hold a business plan revised every January and never registered, a manuscript on its 4th restructuring, a demo recorded 9 times and sent nowhere. Ask what everything in it has in common. Nothing in that folder has ever been allowed to leave the building. There's a tell that separates the craftsman from the perfectionist, and it's the direction of travel. Real craftsmanship moves toward done, sometimes slowly, sometimes fussily, but toward. Perfectionism orbits. If you want to know which one you're doing, don't examine your standards. Examine your trajectory over the last month and ask whether the thing is closer to the world than it was. Because here is what the unfinished folder never gets to learn. The world is a better editor than the imagination. The imperfect thing enters the world, gathers friction and feedback, and improves. The perfect thing in your head just quietly ages. A furniture maker I'll call Sam found this out on a Tuesday morning. He'd spent most of a year making cutting boards in his garage, walnut, end grain, genuinely good, and photographing them and not listing them because the juice groove wasn't quite right and the oil finish could be better and the product photos needed a proper light box. That Tuesday, at around 7, before the reconsidering part of his brain was awake, he put one board online at a plain price with a phone photo and went to work. The first email arrived within a week from a woman in Portland. She loved it, but the handle groove was too shallow. With wet hands, the board slipped. It stung for about an hour. Then it became a speck. He cut the next batch's grooves deeper, and a later customer's note about board feet fixed his sizing. And by winter, Sam was building boards measurably better than anything he could have designed alone in the garage, improvements he could never have imagined because they lived in other people's wet hands, in other people's kitchens. Meanwhile, the flawless board, the one he'd been waiting to make first, never existed at all. So the practice is this. Ship at good enough to get feedback, deliberately, on a schedule you set before courage is consulted. Sam's rule afterward was one board listed every Friday, in whatever state Friday found it, and the schedule made courage unnecessary, which is the entire point of a schedule. Redefine done so that it means released and improvable. An imperfect thing in the world can grow. A perfect thing in your head can only be protected. But under the perfectionism, under the imposter feeling, under the insurance policies bought at 3 a.m, there is a single load-bearing beam holding the whole structure up. Take it out, and the rest sags and falls on its own. It was installed early, for many of us somewhere around age 7. The psychologist Carol Dweck spent decades studying what she came to call fixed and growth mindsets, and buried in that work is a finding that reads like the biography of every gifted kid you've ever met.
When a child is praised over and over for being smart, rather than for working, struggling, improving, the child learns something no one intended to teach. Smart is what I am. You can see the whole installation in a single image. A 4th grade report card on a refrigerator door, a parent's hand on a small shoulder, and a sentence that felt like sunlight. You're so smart. Nobody meant any harm by it, but in Dweck's research, children praised that way began steering around anything hard enough to endanger the compliment. And from that day forward, every difficult thing stops being a task and becomes a referendum. Struggle stops meaning learning and starts meaning evidence against the label, and the label is now the self. Follow that child into adulthood. He's the man who only plays the games he already wins. He was going to learn guitar, but learning guitar means being bad at guitar for months in front of himself, and bad at something lands like an attack on everything he is, so the guitar went back in the closet inside a year. You can picture it there, behind the winter coats, one string gone slack. He stays in the small pond where the old label still holds, and the tragedy compounds quietly, because the identity he's defending, capable, quick, gifted, is the very thing stopping him from becoming more than he currently is. He is spending his whole intelligence guarding a photograph of his intelligence taken decades ago. And notice how quietly the shrinking happens. There's no single day on which he chooses a smaller life. There is only a long series of reasonable-sounding passes. Not my thing, no time this year, I'd rather stay great at what I already do. Each one witnessed by nobody. Each one moving the property line inward a little, until the territory where he is willing to be seen trying fits inside a few safe rooms. The way out of that trap is a change of grammar, small enough to sound trivial. Stop saying, "I'm good at this." Start saying, "I'm learning this." The first sentence sets a bar the world gets to test you against. The second describes a direction, and a direction can absorb any amount of failure without breaking. Then go further. Deliberately schedule being bad at something. Take the class where you'll be the slowest person in the room. Being a beginner was never a threat to your intelligence. Refusing ever to be one again is the thing that caps it. Which brings us to the question I left open in the first minute of this episode, the one you've maybe been waiting on. If the system is this smart, layered, well-defended, disguised as judgment and diligence and standards, how does anyone get past it? You already know force doesn't work. You've tried force.
Every failed resolution, every stern talk with yourself in the bathroom mirror, every productivity system abandoned by February, that was force, and the guard disarmed all of it without breaking stride. Here is the answer I promised you, and I warned you it would be almost insultingly small. Self-sabotage, all of it. The airtight excuses, the midnight insurance, the researching, the polishing, the guarded label, is fear wearing different uniforms. And you cannot argue fear out of a body. Anyone who has tried to reason themselves calm at 2 a.m. knows this. What you can do is stay under the alarm's threshold. The security system wakes for verdicts, for anything big enough to measure you. So you make the next action too small to carry a verdict. Instead of writing the book, you open the document and put down one ugly paragraph nobody will ever see. Instead of launching the business, you send a single email to a single person and stop there. A single ugly paragraph cannot prove you're a fraud. There's no referendum in it, nothing to measure, nothing worth guarding against. So the guard doesn't stir, and you slip past him carrying something tiny. And it turns out tiny is enough, because of a quirk of the mind the psychologist Bluma Zygarnik noticed nearly a century ago. An unfinished task nags. It stays live in the mind, asking to be closed.
Starting is the steep part of the whole climb. And once you've started, even at this laughable scale, the machinery of completion begins pulling in your favor instead of against you. Play the week forward. Monday night, one deliberately bad paragraph. 4 minutes, close the laptop, and notice that nothing happened. No verdict, no exposure, no collapse. But the paragraph nags in Zygarnik's sense. So on Tuesday, you open the file to fix 1 sentence and accidentally write 3 more. By Thursday, there's a page. It isn't good yet, and it doesn't have to be, because everything that ever becomes good passes through a stage where it is merely real. And somewhere in that week, without ceremony, the guard stopped being consulted. Nothing defeated him. There was simply never anything on the schedule big enough to wake him. This is why waiting to feel ready has never once worked for you. Confidence isn't the key that starts the engine. It's the heat the engine throws off once it's already running. Move first, at miniature scale, and let the doing manufacture the courage. The sequence you were taught, feel sure, then act, runs exactly backward, and you can test that claim tonight for the price of 1 paragraph. So run the whole half hour back in one breath. Your reasons for waiting are brilliant because you built them with a brilliant mind. Question the persuasive ones hardest.
The obstacles you arrange are insurance against ever finding your ceiling. Name them out loud, and they lose their power. The thinking that feels like preparation is a dry simulation of the plunge. Put a timer on deciding. The fraudulence you feel is a reading of where you stand, out at the growing edge. The polishing postpones a verdict the world was going to help you with. The label you're guarding is a photograph, and the way past all of it is an action so small the guard sleeps through it, which returns us, finally, to the guard himself, because you should know who he is before you decide what to do with him. The part of you that sabotages has never once been working against you. Look at him properly, and you'll see a bodyguard, frightened, devoted, wildly overqualified, hired by a much younger you to make sure nobody ever got to measure you, laugh at you, or find you wanting. It has worked that door for decades without a night off, and the threat it's watching for expired years ago. The exam is over. The gifted kid label has no committee behind it anymore. Nobody is coming to revoke you. The person this bodyguard is protecting was never actually in the danger he imagined, and you don't defeat a servant like that. You retire him.
Gently, with some gratitude, and with proof. Small, repeated actions that demonstrate, 1 ugly paragraph at a time, that being seen doesn't destroy you, that being judged doesn't destroy you, that being imperfect in public is survivable, and then ordinary, and then, strangely, freeing. So, tonight, you already know you'll end up back at that file, the one you opened last night and closed without a word. Open it again. This time, don't try to do it justice. Write 1 sentence, a bad one, on purpose, and let it sit there, unfinished and alive, pulling you back toward tomorrow. That's the whole assignment. That is how the person you keep meaning to become actually arrives, at miniature scale, past a sleeping guard, on an ordinary weeknight. If this found you where you are, stay close, subscribe, and let the next episode pick up where this one leaves you, because once you stop getting in your own way, the real question opens up. What are you actually capable of with the brakes off? For now, don't answer that. Just write the sentence. That's enough.